May I crave your indulgence now to please put your hands together for Dr. Eric Boy as he comes to the podium for this beautiful assignment.
We are here to celebrate. We're here to celebrate the achievement of the wonderful teams that you have met this morning, and the hard work that several institutions, public, private sector, have put together. And to complement all of that hard work, I have been tasked to share with you a journey of scientific discovery and the production of the evidence that gives a meaning to all the hard work that IITA, HarvestPlus, the other CG centers have been doing. Because without evidence that biofortified food actually improves health, there is no sense in doing biofortification. So I would invite you to accompany me in this very fast journey through the different studies that have provided proof that biofortification works, and that the work that you are all doing is very worthwhile and something that needs to be further scaled up so that all Nigerians have access to these types of foods. Like it was said before, nutrition is the business of everybody here, and it is unacceptable that still 12 billion people are affected by the deficiency of vitamins and nutrients. And it is unacceptable to, again, see problems like you see in these pictures, which is only the tip of the iceberg. And nowadays, you barely see blindness or enlarged goiters because of iodine deficiency, or severely stunted and mentally constrained children because of iodine deficiency. You don't see that anymore. But below the water, the bottom of the iceberg, is 2 billion people suffering from subclinical problems that don't allow them to reach their full potential. And so what can we do to alleviate micronutrient deficiency or hidden hunger? We can do several things. The ideal is that everybody has access to a very diversified diet, 4 to 6 servings of fruits and vegetables, 2 or 3 servings of whole grain cereals, legumes, dairy, meat. That's the ideal, but we know that that's not accessible to the people that need it the most. So while that happens, while the socioeconomic conditions for that type of diet to be available to all, there are other things that we can do, like supplementation, which is tablets and capsules to people that are at risk of deficiency. We can also add vitamins and minerals to food that is processed in large mills and then distributed through supermarkets, but not everybody has access to those either. And we can do biofortification, which is we let the plants do the work, we let the plants increase the amounts of micronutrients that are contained in the parts that people eat, and then use this as a complementary intervention within the food systems that are already in place in countries like Nigeria, and prevent micronutrient deficiency. So to know and be assured that biofortification works and actually improves human nutrition and health, we have to answer 3 basic questions. The first one is, can plant breeding increase the amounts of vitamins and minerals in the crops that people are eating? Second, when people eat these improved varieties of foods, will there be a measurable impact on their health and nutrition status? Can we see a difference? And third, will farmers and consumer accept and consume these products once they are in the market? So if one of these questions is answered with a no, then biofortification is not going to work. Of course, the answers to these questions have been provided not by HarvestPlus, but by many top researchers around the world, many of whom are here in Africa, in Nigeria, University of Ibadan, together with Wageningen University, IITA, and others have conducted the studies that I will present shortly and briefly. But many institutions around the world have conducted the studies that I will present to you right now. And all of these studies are publicly available. They have been published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. They are open access, so if anybody is interested in any of the studies that have been conducted just come up to us and we'll give you access to them. So let's go directly into answering the first question. Can crop breeders, can Dr. Abebe here working on maize increase the vitamin A in maize enough that it will make a difference in human nutrition? Or can that be achieved? And of course here I have to read a disclaimer. All the crops that HarvestPlus is promoting are produced through conventional plant breeding. None of them are products of genetic engineering or genetically modified organism. So, can we increase the nutrients in the staple crops that people are consuming? Yes, we can. We already have beans available with twice the amount of iron that normal beans have. They are available and have been released in Rwanda, in Congo, and they are slowly making their way to other neighboring countries. So Nigerians bring those beans to Nigeria, you know, and then double the amount of iron that these beans can provide to vulnerable children and women of childbearing age. These varieties are not only more nutritious, they are also climate smart. They are, you know, disease resistant, drought resistant, and heat tolerant. Not all of the varieties have all of these qualities, but those that need to have those qualities are bred to have them so that they can be accepted by farmers. There are also iron pearl millet varieties with about 60% more iron and zinc than the normal varieties. They have been released in India, but they are also suitable for the dry climates of Nigeria, Ghana, the Sahel region. And they are also making their way to these regions slowly, but pearl millet is a great source of iron and zinc. And we also have vitamin A maize that has been studied, I think, to death, and the levels reached of vitamin A in maize are not to the optimum, but even at that lower level we have seen nutritional impact. And zinc maize is under development. Varieties have been released in Latin America, but they are only being developed now in Africa. And this is the crop that will be the zinc vehicle for Africans, because whole wheat grain is not consumed extensively here as is maize. And of course, there are other crops that have been released with higher levels of nutrients, levels high enough to produce a nutritional and health impact. You know the story about cassava. Nigeria has done the studies, and cassava for southern Nigeria can provide more than 100% of the requirement of vitamin A for children and women of childbearing age. The same thing with orange flesh sweet potato. And the reason I have highlighted the wheat with red is that the levels of zinc you can achieve in wheat can be through biofortification up to 12 milligrams per kilo above the normal amounts. But if you add zinc fertilizer, you can get to 20, 25 milligrams per kilogram difference. So the potential is there for all of these crops, and all of these crops have been released in different countries. So plant breeders can and have reached significant levels of micronutrients in staple crops, but do these crops produce an important nutritional effect, health effect, positive health effect in people when they are consumed over, you know, relatively short periods of time, 3 to 6 months? And these are the gold standard studies for nutrition and health. These are studies where you give one half of a large group of people the biofortified food and the other half the normal food, and then you test them before and after to see if there was a change. This study was conducted in Rwanda. University women, non-pregnant, non-lactating, they were fed biofortified beans for 5 months. And in 5 months, there was an improvement in the iron reserves that they had in their bodies. But because of that, there was also an improvement in their memory and attention span, which is very important for university students or any student, as a matter of fact. But even beyond that, the girls that were consuming the high iron bean had greater physical endurance, and they spent less time doing nothing, you know, just sitting on the couch. They were more active because they were not iron deficient anymore. And we know this because we measured their physical activity and their capability of solving problems on computers while measurements were going on around their skulls. So high-end technology to measure these effects. The same methods were used with younger school children in India, in Mumbai. Cornell University did the studies with the other 2 universities locally. They gave these children pearl millet bread 2 times a day for 5 days a week for 4.5 months. And at the end of this period, the children that ate the biofortified pearl millet, 65% of iron deficiency was reversed or eliminated. And the children that had no iron deficiency anymore were more performed better in school. They had, again, better memory retrieval and better attention spans. And they also had improved physical endurance and activity. So consistent results. Iron is important at the university, at boarding school in India. So again, nutrition is everybody's business, and all of the population would benefit from these types of crops. But then we move on to vitamin A crops. And vitamin A maize has been tested in at least 4 large studies in Zambia. And the results summarized are that children who consume orange maize for 3 to 6 months improved the reserves of vitamin A in their livers. That means that whenever they are ill with an infection, they can defend themselves better. And their visual acuity, especially at night, also improved. And we measured this with sophisticated computerized goggles that measure how the eyes adapt to dark conditions. And the children who ate the orange maize adapted better to darker conditions, so they could see better. And cassava is closer to home. It's closer to everybody's hearts here, the gari and the fufu. And cassava has been tested in Kenya with older school children and with younger school children here in Nigeria, in a place close by. Ibadan University and Wageningen University finished the study last year, and they just finished writing the manuscript that will soon be published. And both studies saw a small but significant increase in vitamin A nutrition in both groups of children. We don't know if there were other health effects because the data is still under analysis, but the results are very encouraging because even though these young children here in Telemu were receiving the vitamin A capsule every 6 months, the cassava had an additional effect in improving vitamin A status. And why is that important to have good vitamin A status? Well, a large study in Mozambique demonstrated that 2 years after the intervention had been rolled out in 20,000 households in Mozambique, the children who were still eating orange flesh sweet potato experienced significantly less episodes of diarrhea, and that the diarrhea lasted shorter periods of time. And you know, diarrhea is the second killer of children under 5 in the world. Here in Nigeria is not an exception. Pneumonia is the first killer. So vitamin A status is important because it helps children defend themselves against common infections that can become severe enough to cause death. And this study showed that vitamin A protects against that. And vitamin A is not the only nutrient that is added to crops through biofortification. Zinc is really, perhaps to my liking, the most important nutrient of all because it involves over 200 different reactions in our bodies, from reproductive health to vision to defense against infections, and normal growth, normal taste acuity, all of these things. So a study with whole wheat flour that had been biofortified with zinc took place in India with 3,000 households. Half received the zinc wheat, half the normal wheat. After only 4.5 months of consuming this biofortified wheat, there was a significant improvement in the health of the mothers and the children that were consuming the wheat. The children experienced a significantly lower number of days sick with pneumonia and with vomiting. So respiratory, gastrointestinal problems. And their mothers experience almost 100 days on average, the whole group, with fever. And you know that if a mother is not sick, she can take better care of the children. And the children that are well taken care of, well, they grow up to be healthier than when the mother is sick all the time and doesn't have time to take care of the children, their feeding, their education. Now, I spoke about zinc maize for Africa. And the studies will begin in 2020, thanks to our donor, DFID, and Bill and Melinda Gates. But the one study that has been carried out in Zambia with high zinc maize, still experimental lines, showed that if children under 5 years of age consume this kind of maize as porridge on a daily basis instead of the normal maize, they can get the full zinc requirement just from that one crop for zinc. And these are absorption studies, so we haven't done it for 5-6 months. That's what follows, but the initial results are very encouraging. Maize can be the source of zinc for vulnerable groups in sub-Saharan Africa. So I think that the evidence of clinical trials, all published in scientific journals, clearly demonstrates that biofortified crops do impact health and nutrition positively. That means healthier populations, more productive populations, more intelligent populations, and a brighter future for everyone. But, scientific data can be just that. But if farmers are not producing and housewives not cooking, families not consuming these crops, then nothing happens. So several studies that were done with colorful crops, the vitamin A crops have a different color, showed that color was not a significant constraint and for acceptance of these crops. Especially if a little bit of nutrition information was given to the heads of households, then they saw no problem with the change of color. And then when they tasted them, the taste, especially the maize, is a little sweeter. They like that too. And they like these crops especially for feeding children. And the amount of nutrition information necessary to produce this minor behavior change is very small. And the other important things for families to accept these crops is that they require an access to market. That's the other constraint. So if they grow these crops and there's no access to market, well, they can't eat the whole thing, so they have to access markets, and that's something that my other colleagues here can address much better than I. But the proof is in the pudding, and the fact that these crops have been accepted wherever they have been deployed is in these numbers. In the last few years, about 5 million households, or 25 million people, have been reached by biofortified materials that they are growing and consuming. About 20 to 23% of the Rwandan land that is cultivated with beans is cultivated with biofortified beans. So that's a really great achievement. And that only happens because of the multidisciplinary work and dedication of people like the team that Paul had up here, and the private and public sector entrepreneurs like yourselves. So please keep it up. So have we answered the 3 questions to say that biofortification works? I think that the answer is a resounding yes for each one of those questions. We can produce crops with higher nutrient contents. These nutrients benefit the health and nutrition of mothers, children, adolescents, and farmers are consuming and growing. 18 minutes, yeah. Yep. Okay, technology problems. So biofortification, once you leave all the science aside, but don't forget it, makes sense because it's based on crops that people are already consuming, and there is very little behavior change that's necessary. All of these crops are proven scientifically to reduce morbidity and improve nutritional status. And these crops are, because of their nature, they are readily available to everyone in the household. It's not only for children and women. Everybody can consume and does consume them. And biofortification is cost effective. After the investment in the development of these crops are public goods. They should cost the same as the normal crops that are being sold in the markets. And so biofortification makes sense. And because of the science and because it is a technology that makes sense, there is biofortification is endorsed by global global dignitaries and luminaries, some people say. So a familiar face, Dr. Adesina, World Food Prize winner, and Dr. Swaminathan, another World Food Prize winner, and the father of the Indian Green Revolution, and the director of the chief scientist of the UK Agency for International Development, all have expressed their endorsement of biofortification as a cost-effective and efficacious intervention for the farming communities and countries at large around the world. So with that, I thank you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to make them.